Hi, this is Kasian, and it's time for a weekly conference call at VectorspaceAI. We'll start with what's happening around the world. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is backing the rollout of Moderna and Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 boosters in line with the Food and Drug Administration's authorization issued Wednesday. The CDC is also supporting a mix and match approach to booster vaccination. Putin orders Russians to stop work for a week amid record COVID daily deaths. BTC is trading in the range of 62,000 and hit an all-time high of 67,000 yesterday, while ETH is trading in the 4,000 range and the Dow is at 35.4. On the industry side, The Guardian is reporting AI and maths to play a bigger role in global diplomacy, says expert. International diplomacy relied on bargaining power, as it quotes, covert channels of communication and personal chemistry between leaders. But a new era is upon us in which the dispassionate insights of AI algorithms and mathematical techniques such as game theory will play a growing role in deals struck between nations, according to the co-founder of the world's first Center for Science in Diplomacy. Michael Amboul, a professor of negotiation and conflict management and former chief Swiss EU negotiator, said recent advancements in AI and machine learning mean that these technologies now have a meaningful part to play in international diplomacy, including at the COP26 summit starting later this month and in post-Brexit deals on trade and negotiation. These technologies are partially already used and will be the intention to use them more, said Amboul. Everything around data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, we want to see how it can be made beneficial for multilateral or bilateral diplomacy. Our next headline, industry headline, a new Nobel. Computer scientist wins $1 million in artificial intelligence prize. Rudin's, and I'm quoting from the article, Rudin's first applied project was a collaboration with Con Edison, the energy company responsible for powering New York City. Her assignment was to use machine learning to predict which manholes were at risk of exploding due to degrading and overloading electrical circuitry. But she soon discovered that no matter how many newly published academic bells and whistles she added to her code, it struggled to meaningfully improve performance when confronted with the challenges posed by working with handwritten notes from dispatchers and accounting records from the time of Thomas Edison. Continuing, we were getting more accuracy from the simple classical statistical techniques and better understanding of the data as we continued to work with it, Rudin said. If we could understand what information the predictive models were using, we could ask the Con Edison engineers for useful feedback that improved the whole process. It was the interpretability in the process that helped improve accuracy in our predictions, not any bigger or fancier machine learning model. And that's what I decided to work on. And it is the foundation upon which my lab is built. So that's particularly important to us as we engage in human-in-the-loop curation or curation by knowledge domain experts or market researchers. The next headline is small data. Also, crucial for machine learning. And this is Scientific American reporting. The most promising artificial intelligence approaches you've never heard of doesn't need to go big. Next, we've got Meet Starlab, private space planned to fly in 2027. So this is a private space station that's planning on orbiting Earth. And it continues, Earth orbit may be a hive of commercial activity a few years from now. NanoRacks, Voyager Space, and Lockheed Martin announced today, October 21st, that they plan to get a free-flying private space station up and running in low Earth orbit by 2027. Next, we've got NASA Asteroid Explorer leaves planet on Atlas V rocket. Also related to our industry, and quoting, the way we think of them are as fossils, which is why we named the Lucy spacecraft after the human ancestor fossil known as Lucy, said Hal Levinson. principal investigator for the Lucy mission at Southwest Research Institute in Boulder, Colorado. This is going to tell us how the giant planets formed and how they moved around. And that's Astronomy Now reporting, and as we know, they are also looking for asteroids with high value or rare earth minerals, sometimes trillion-dollar asteroids. And our final industry headline, which is a good segue into themes and events, Schwab CEO says personalized investing is coming like a freight train. And quoting, personalization, such as via direct indexing and thematic investing, is the future of investing, according to Bettinger. Next, we've got themes and events. And Barron's is reporting, this small biotech is partnering with Johnson & Johnson. The stock could more than double. This is one event that we've been watching in the Thematic Baskets channel, and a few have generated thematic baskets, different kinds of thematic baskets with different kinds of filtering techniques related to this particular article with good results, good returns. If you'd like to find out more about that, you can join the Thematic Baskets channel. And whenever there is a PR posted on the Thematic Baskets channel, we have support personnel there ready to generate a thematic basket or a set of thematic baskets based on a single press release or based on a news story. Could be based on a newly peer-reviewed science paper being published. But thematic baskets will be built. They'll be using two interfaces. We've got the legacy interface at vectorspaceAI/Symetica, that's CYMETICA/dataset. And the second interface we have is thematic.vectorspace.ai. That is our new interface based on new data sources and will be the basis of some of our retail offerings. Next, we've got our corporate section. And under corporate, we've got HR. We are continuing hiring. And we've got our legal section. We are using most of our legal resources to review an exchange agreement. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And under facilities, we have not completed finding an office yet, so we're going to continue to scout out locations for a headquarters here in Berkeley, and it will be likely in the Berkeley area. And we've got a few options. We will keep the public updated on timing. It's likely going to be Q1 2022 at this point. Next, we've got engineering, product, QA, and ops. And our first section is the Space Biosciences section here. And we have quite a bit happening in terms of what we're going to be doing with our collaborators, which will result in data sets that can be used in the financial markets. But before we get to that, one of the first engineering efforts that we'll be engaging in is going to be wrapping up, winding down a few efforts that we have currently, putting a bow on a few things, and then gearing up for supporting our collaborations with Imperial College of London and University College London. This is going to mean that we are going to be initially bringing in data sources related to the specific basic research that's happening here. And that would in particular mean relationship network construction to explore hidden connections between the genes NME4 and surrounding proteins, surrounding pathways, and the gene OPA1, OPA1, and in the context of cardiolipin, mitochondria, mitophagy pathway, lifespan, and aging, which of course all connect to space biosciences. We will also be building a relationship network for protein sequence similarity matching. So if a researcher would like to understand what similar proteins might map together or cluster together because they have similar sequences, will enable a product that will provide them with the ability to explore relationships between these protein sequences, similar protein sequences. So what that takes, of course, at the core is a language model, a very specifically tuned and optimized language model with specific data sources, including real-time data sources from the National Library of Medicine's PubMed. And this will also fall right in line with the designing of experiments for the HP Spaceborne Computer 2. And again, this is HP's system in collaboration with Microsoft, Azure Space, and SpaceX to conduct experiments on the ISS for about 2 hours every day. And we are going to be designing our own experiments in collaboration with the RUS lab and ICL in collaboration with UCL and a few other labs as our network of labs grows, network of collaborations here. What that is going to mean is that there are going to be experiments that, for example, the RUS lab would be involved with designing related to galactic cosmic rays, or HCE particles, high charge, high energy, heavy ion particles, and their effect on sequences of DNA and protein, and their subsequent effects on the mitophagy pathway. When we look at the National Library of Medicine and PubMed on the engineering level, this would mean, as mentioned, creating a real-time crawler, and Raf Podowski is working with, Raf Podowski, our Chief Scientific Officer, is working with our engineering group, as Raf has been working in collaboration with a few others related to a PubMed crawler that will provide real-time abstracts and papers for us. We have one of our own, but they've been working on a much nicer one. So we're going to go ahead and collaborate with them and use some of that code. That will enable us to inject PubMed into Elasticsearch, and then of course conduct different kinds of queries, different kinds of verticals or categories of information, or peer-reviewed published papers that we'll then use to construct language models around. The whole point is to enable real-time relationship networks. So if a few papers are published related to a new research finding and its connection to or between a drug compound and a protein, we want to, and let's say it reinforces that connection, then we want to have that same connection reinforced within our relationship network in real time or near real time. And as we bring in these data sources, when you look at real-time data sources, this is something that our financial market customers want. They would like to know what kind of drug compounds are being researched. What is the latest research on a drug compound that's scheduled for some kind of FDA review? If you've got a public pharmaceutical company, if you're an asset management company and you've got a group that specializes in just trading pharmas, then we're going to have a data set that's going to enable you with an edge that you wouldn't get any other place, with the exception of the research institutions that we collaborate with. Because these data sets are going to be based on very specific drug repurposing and drug repositioning related to proteins that our collaborators are studying. So we're going to have very specific data sets that we're going to be offering Morningstar, and this would be a custom data set with custom data sources, but it would intersect with the research that we're doing related to our collaborators. And we know that that is the best way for us to sell subscriptions to data sets, is to help the world understand that number one, you won't get these data sets anywhere else, and two, we are more qualified than any other group in the world to produce a data set like this that enables hidden relationships between pharmaceutical companies, drug compounds, and proteins and cancer therapeutics. So that is the reason that we are leading with science here at VectorspaceAI, and then technology, and then all else. We want to make sure that everyone understands that the basis for the correlation scores in our data set are based on solid science and, in fact, basic research and potentially novel discoveries. So, in line with that, we've got our financial markets section under engineering. And to quickly go through that, that simply means that data sets that we publish in Space Biosciences, Life Sciences, will be repurposed for the financial markets, in particular the pharma sector. We will then move to other sectors and focus on those, and we will, of course, roll out crypto. But for now, we are putting together a custom dataset order for Morningstar to trial, and that will be based on the research that is happening currently with our collaborators. This dataset will also be available, of course, to institutions. That's the whole point of moving forward with Morningstar. Next, we've got CERN under engineering. And CERN has provided us with new marching orders. This is related to unsupervised clustering of particle vectors. We have done this before. This is how we started with CERN. We just took one of their data sets and engaged in clustering. We created, I think, 5 clusters. And we used a homegrown clustering technique based on an uncensored Pearson correlation. And that gave us interesting clusters, we thought, and CERN to this day thinks that they are still interesting clusters. And so they want to continue this work of clustering data sets like this. We were advancing into the area of clustering based on a language model, but CERN wanted to use some of the algorithms we use to cluster vectors in language models to cluster vectors of particles. So they're finding use, and this also means that for each cluster, we are going to understand how to connect Feynman diagrams, and this would be with a human-in-the-loop approach. So there's a group of researchers at CERN that would like to produce attributes related to Feynman diagrams so that they can be connected to these clusters. And just in case anyone does not know what a Feynman diagram is, here's Wikipedia's definition. Quoting, "In theoretical physics, a Feynman diagram is a pictorial representation of the mathematical expressions describing the behavior and interactions of subatomic particles." Unquote. Next, we'll move to our customers, partners, and collaborators section. All strategies remain intact, and that's the only update that we can provide right now. We don't have any fresh updates, but all things are steady as she goes, essentially, with the exception of the laser-like focus on the pharma dataset for Morningstar, which will then, of course, apply to all other partners of ours. And next, we've got corporate strategy, corporate development, business development, sales, and marketing. And all of this hinges, as you can see, on our collaborators and then on the data sets that we're now building related to the pharma sector, and Morningstar's adoption or the trial at Morningstar, which we're preparing for, also related to their notebooks. Once we've honed that approach and successfully achieved consequential revenue with that approach, we will then cookie cut it. It's that simple. Next, we'll move on to exchanges, and we are continuing as in process. So we're going to categorize what we're doing with Qcoin, for example, and other exchanges as in process, and specifically this week means that we have made some progress, although we are still in process. We are negotiating with them one more time while we wait on our legal department to review the agreement, and that is critical. Our legal department, our lead counsel, has spent a lot of time with the SEC, and we have a whole network of legal counsel and advisors that will be able to provide us with good direction in terms of whether or not this is a good move forward, whether or not the agreement, whether or not the exchange might be on a target list with the SEC. These days, we never know, but this is something we have to check for. And we are just waiting on that check at this point. After that, all things are good to go from KuCoin's side, all things are good to go from our side, and we'll continue to move on with other exchanges. One of the benefits that we talk about with exchanges is the ability to offer them thematic baskets for their entire client base. So when we roll out crypto, we'll begin those discussions with exchanges. And of course, we'll look quite a bit different to exchanges once we roll out that product offering, where they're able to actually generate more revenue themselves based on increasing transactions. Next, we'll move to questions from the trader base. Question 1. Could we get some more information on how the collaboration with ICL and UCL will work? As in, what will each party bring to the table? What will the makeup/integration of the teams be like? And will the collaborations be for an initial set period of time? So with ICL and UCL, they are both space biosciences oriented. With ICL, there is a focus on longevity and specifically on a handful of proteins. And they want to understand hidden relationships between those proteins. So what that means for us is that we begin to construct scientific data engineering pipelines. This would mean that we would define data sources and create input files, create language models, create data sets, custom data sets, and custom context controls. And then we would have a relationship network constructed where hidden connections between, for example, NME4 and OPA1 would be explored based on similarities within the language model itself that two genes might share with one another, or a protein and a cancer therapeutic, or a potential drug that can be repurposed. So creating that relationship network, you can see it starts with the data sources and it ends with the visualization, the ability to interpret and then move either toward generating a new hypothesis or making a discovery or novel discovery. That's the whole point. There is also interest, we should say, from all collaborators in creating a relationship network based on protein sequences that are similar to one another. So we'll be creating that in collaboration with Imperial College of London and University College of London, as both have requested that kind of functionality, bioinformatics functionality. With Imperial College of London, we'll also be working to design experiments for the HP Spaceborne Computer 2, as we've been invited to do that from the Azure Space side. And UCL will also be providing input on the designing of the experiments. We are then going to be working with UCL on space policy, space law, and specifically competition law, along with climate and environmental impacts that the space industry might need to address in the future or currently. And when it comes to designing, UCL will be participating in the designing of experiments, as mentioned, for the HP Spaceborne, and Azure Space will be storing the data and responsible for launching the HP Spaceborne Computer 2 to the ISS with new experiments. We are also going to be conducting our own launch with Masten Space Systems, and as mentioned, that's scheduled for 2024, but we need to understand the kind of experiments and the dimensions required for the experiments. So this is going to be a long process, the actual designing of the experiment. But we'll certainly be updating the public. Imperial College of London will be updating the public, and University College of London will be updating the public on the progress of our collaborations and each thing that we do along the way, each progress point. They're also going to be working with our scientific advisory board. And as we grow that scientific advisory board, we'll be making a few PR announcements, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Question 2, with Vectorspace's plans to be listed on NASDAQ, is there any future relationship of any kind to be had with the new bullish exchange, with bullish being in quotes? So we're going to have relationships with all exchanges. If you're an exchange and you need the ability to provide real-time thematic baskets to your clientele, to your trader base, you can come to us to make that happen. There's no other group or service that's providing real-time thematic baskets associated to global themes or a topic of anyone's choice. What that means is that we intend to work with 1 or 2 institutions. And those 1 or 2 institutions will also be institutions that will enable us to be listed on the exchanges that we want or uplist to a particular exchange. What we don't know is the kind of instrument that we'll be using to represent the trading vehicle on an exchange like NASDAQ or NYSE. So it's early days. We'll provide more details moving forward, but those same 2 institutions will be institutions that will likely work with our investment club as well. And that relates to question 3. How does the investment club work around the SEC's member limit? What kind of progress can be shared on, and how will this be compliant? So in order to remain compliant, we're going to be working with a registered financial advisor, and this would be either 1 or 2 institutions that Morningstar refers to us that will take our 1,000 investment club members and service them. Question 4, there seems to be a mistake in the fact it says as they use the services, the VXV is used up. My understanding is that the tokens are not consumed by the use of the services. Could you provide some clarity on that? Could you walk us through what happens to the VXV tokens before, during, and after paying for a service? Sure, it's very simple. The customer would determine the amount of VXV needed to access a custom tiered service level of their choice. And then they would acquire that amount of VXV, which would be in a wallet. When they are done using that data set, or no longer find it useful, they can sell the VXV to A, the company, or B, another counterparty, or C, on the open market. And then they will no longer have access to that data set, its changes or its updates. They can have a static version on their own, but the value is in the updating, the change in the information. Question 5. What does the team think about something like the IQ protocol made by Parsec? It's a software as a service open source model which allows one to create expirable NFTs, versions of any token that you can lend to anyone, mostly companies, risk-free. So we avoid building on top of other platforms for all kinds of reasons related to dependencies. We've mentioned this, I think, just in our last call. So we will pass on that. Question 6. Was there any interest for a collaboration between Vectorspace and the other 2 gentlemen on the trading show panel with you? Yes. Question 7. We can see a lot of projects/companies aiming to offer some kind of trading platform, AI-powered. Do you have already identified some serious contender? Does Vectorspace wish/will provide some connector of them? I don't know if it makes sense or can add any value to Vectorspace as a supplier. Okay, yes, we are a supplier of correlation matrix datasets, and any AI company is welcome to try our datasets out, as datasets are the fuel that power AI and ML systems. That's why we're here. Question 8, what's your take on a personal note about decentralization, and particularly decentralized AI? Do you think that it can lead to a fairer world at the condition of well-balanced nor bias-free? Do you think social media needs decentralization, maybe even DAO for governments? Well, that's a loaded question, but the first part, yes, decentralized AI, I personally would agree that that would make for a better world, a fair world, as you put it. In terms of bias-free, that's a tough one, and we usually don't wade into those waters, as we don't deal with that kind of data. And the last, do you think social media needs decentralization, maybe even DAO for governments? Well, social media itself is the problem, and that kind of roots on the basis of promoting oneself being the inherent problem there. This is the difference between Google and Facebook. They have different problems because apples and oranges, and they've always been apples and oranges. One's 10 times more valuable than the other. Question 9. I'm a VXV holder but have concerns. My feeling is that VectorspaceAI is a company and should be run like a serious company, whether NDAs have been signed or not. Why do we keep seeing tweets or about Morningstar/S&P which are indiscreet and sometimes could be seen as unprofessional? Well, this is no different than what's been going on in the traditional markets for decades, maybe longer. Take Knight Securities. This is a company that used to be sued by the SEC and settled for $10 million every month for creating naked short positions all over the place. Those naked short positions were used by people that would pay for a group to short a stock. And the group that they would pay to short the stock would distribute misinformation related to that stock. This is pretty common. Hired short sellers to spread misinformation. This just goes to show you that even in the traditional markets, you've got this same issue with groups spreading misinformation that are out of the company's control. And this is what the Securities and Exchange Commission understands, and that's why they go after stock promoters. Before there were ever crypto promoters, there were stock promoters. Now there are stock and crypto promoters. And crypto promoters are different than stock promoters. A lot of stock promoters have gotten in trouble in the past, so they're a lot calmer than crypto promoters. Crypto promoters, there's more of them, and they're using less controls because the market's in general less regulated. We are dealing with the worldwide Wild West, a true globally exposed open capital marketplace, and for the first time in history. This means that more individuals will be part of this process than ever before. Some will not know what the Dow is. Some may have never traded a stock, bond, option, or anything like that in their life, and maybe never will. This means that the learning curves are all over the map, literally. So you're going to have people out there that are going to do whatever they want to do when it comes to information. They will post whatever they want to post, wherever they want to. We are not in control of that. We're only in control of our corporate channels of communication. Next, we'll move to our strategy section. We've created liquidity in the past. And right now, we are experiencing organic liquidity. This is a reminder to everyone that this is what we have This is what we've tried to accomplish all along. This has been our goal, our focus has been creating organic liquidity in our trading vehicle so that we'll have some equilibrium on the price here, and that's kind of where we are right now. But we also know that it's been a tough road in terms of achieving consequential revenue, and it's going to continue to be a tough road as we achieve consequential revenue. That's the hardest path you can possibly take. Not many cryptos take that path. And we also know it takes patience. Now, at the same time, money will exchange hands and the tree will shake, and there will be big players and little players that want to change hands and liquidate their positions. Everyone has their own model, and it's very important to understand right now. We may have a big player or two exiting a position, but that's okay. We'll eat them up. We do every time. So it's just a matter of patience. What we also wanted to mention was that, on a completely different note, but slightly related, spaceflight has caused DNA to leak out of an astronaut's cell powerhouse, or what we call the mitochondria. The paper is titled "Cell-Free Mitochondrial DNA as a Potential Biomarker for Astronauts' Health," and this is in the Journal of the American Heart Association, published there. Quoting Jamila Sianwala, a researcher on NASA's twin study, said that the new study was limited by its small size, short length, and lack of information about the astronauts' health. Still, the findings are another key part of a growing body of evidence about the risks of human spaceflight, said Sianwala, an associate professor of micropharmacology, molecular pharmacology, physiology, and biotechnology at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. She was not involved in the new research. "I cannot tell you how important these studies are," Sianwala said, "before we start thinking about commercial spaceflight or establishing factories in space. We need to understand how the human body responds to these drastic conditions in such a hostile place." Unquote. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next week, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to join us online.